Oz, I want to build on that because I know that in Islam, there's a similar concept to tikkun olam. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then how Muslim Americans for Compassion are implementing and working towards repairing the world?
Yeah, and I know I say this at the risk of sounding a little bit cliche, but breaking bread with your neighbors and breaking down barriers that exist really goes a long way. And so, look, we're all very busy with our day jobs, but whenever we can dedicate some time and energy to worthwhile causes, we should do so. And MAC, for instance, under the leadership of Dr. Muhammad Baber, who I know a lot of people on this phone call know, and a lot of people who are participating in this Zoom will also similarly know. It's so critical to continue to engage because intolerance, whether it's intolerance, ignorance, confusion, whatever it is, it's up to our faith tradition, our community, and our foot soldiers in the trenches and allies like Matt, who correctly noted his efforts post vandalism. It's up to us to soften the hearts, to soften the minds, to educate. And so MAC, whether it's delivering lunches to first responders post 9/11 to make sure that people know that, look, we work with our first responders and law enforcement agencies to ensure that something like that never happens again. Not only because it's anti-American, but it's going to make life more difficult for the Muslim American community, right? So we're trying our best to soften those hearts and dedicate our time and energy. It's difficult, right? There are competing forces. There are competing forces in the media. There are competing forces with some of our elected representatives throughout the country. And so young minds are very impressionable. And so we're seeing it with school-age kids, which is why Matt was also correct to note that we try to engage our schools and our school leadership whenever possible to help nip these things in the bud, because guys like me and Matt have voices. We're articulate enough. We have the resources to defend ourselves. A poor immigrant child who doesn't have English as a first language, who happens to wear a hijab, struggles, right? So I was a little bit all over the place there, but we try our best to identify initiatives that will help kind of soften these hearts. And honestly, the city of Louisville fares a lot better than other places because of many years of hard work with leadership that is sympathetic and willing to engage, with great community allies like those who are on this phone call, with great law enforcement like Tim's agency. So we fare a lot better than we see sometimes in the media elsewhere. And that's not by mistake. I think that's due to a lot of really proactive efforts by a lot of people, not just myself and others at MAC.
So as you mentioned the school age kids, and so I want to launch into this one, and frankly, it's open to all of you. How is xenophobia and intolerance impacting our young school age children? Is it something that's reported within the schools? Is it something that they're tracking? And what has been the response of not just JCPS, but maybe other schools, other private schools that we have in Louisville to those types of reports?
So I can't speak with any level of certainty or authority for that matter across the board. I have some experience with JCPS. In full disclosure, I'm a product of public schools in Southern Indiana, just across the river, a proud product of those public schools. So I can't speak the parochial schools and the other private schools in Louisville or elsewhere in the state. But, as we see an influx of first generation immigrants coming to this community, and a lot of times from the Muslim community, those are coming from war-torn countries, right? So our own diaspora, our Muslim diaspora here in Louisville, as Joel noted with the Asian community, is very diverse. I happen to come from a Pakistani background, professional parents. That's not uncommon amongst a lot of the Pakistanis who've settled in Louisville or the Indian community. But it's a different experience for those coming from Arab war-torn countries. Iraq was mentioned as one country, right? Ethiopia, Somalia are two others that come to mind. And of course, Bosnia. And so these experiences for some of these school age kids who are coming, literally uprooted from their home countries into a very foreign environment, it can be very challenging for them. And so thankfully, there's a lot of really, really great teachers, both in JCPS and elsewhere, who are working to proactively identify these microaggressions that lead to maybe more significant substantive bullying, which over time can create a really, really undesirable situation for everyone in school. And so I think that there are great efforts being made. I don't have a great sense of figures and stats. I obviously have a little bit of perspective just through my community work to sort of keep my ear to the ground and know what's happening. But I'm sure there's an underreporting. I'm sure that there are those voiceless, vulnerable kiddos who aren't willing to speak up, which is why, unfortunately, it puts a lot of pressure on the other kiddos and the teachers who are on the front lines to identify it and nip it in the bud.